Good morning. Good morning. Philosophy of religion and other disciplines. Objectives to help the students to see the relationship between philosophy of religion and other disciplines, to be able to appreciate the relationship between myths, religion, and philosophy, to see how contemporary sciences contribute to philosophy of religion. Introduction. Philosophy means the love of wisdom. Wisdom is the knowledge of ultimate causes, explanations, and principles. It includes knowledge of values, not just facts. It gives you a big picture, a worldview, and a life view. It explores such questions as these: what is the essence of a human being? What is the meaning, value, goal, purpose of human life? What is a good life? What is a good society? Are there higher laws than men's laws? Are we here by chance or design? Are we fated or free? How do we know what is good or evil? How do we know anything? Is anything certain? Can reason prove or disprove the existence of God? Why do we suffer? Why do we die? Is there life after death? Coming to the Greek tradition, although it may be common to speak of a Greek religion, in fact, the Greeks themselves didn't use such a term. Further, they might not have recognized it had someone else attempted to apply it to their practices. At the same time, it is difficult to accept the idea that the Greeks were completely secular and irreligious. However, this is why a better understanding of Greek religion helps illuminate the nature of religion generally, as well as the nature of religions which continue to be followed today. This in turn is critical for anyone who wants to engage in a sustained appreciation and critique of religion and religious beliefs. If we mean by religion a set of beliefs and behavior which are consciously chosen and ritually followed to the exclusion of all other alternatives, then the Greeks didn't really have a religion. If, however, we mean by religion more generally people's ritual behavior and beliefs about sacred items, places, and beings, then the Greeks most certainly did have a religion, or perhaps a set of religions, in recognition of the great variety of Greek beliefs. Perhaps when discussing religions, we should look more closely at the beliefs about what is sacred and holy, as was done by leaders of comparative study like Mirka Eliade. So, in this unit, we first deal with the three sciences of Aristotle that helps us to see religion as one of the foundational discipline. Then we see its relationship to myths. This helps us to relate philosophy of religion to theology and then later to social sciences. Then we take up two more related disciplines from science and see how they can dialogue with philosophy of religion. Three sciences, three sciences according to Aristotle. Probably the most commonsensical and influential philosopher of all time was Aristotle. Aristotle says that there are three whys, these three purposes, ends, or reasons for anyone ever to study and learn anything in school or out of it. Thus, Thus, there are three kinds of sciences which he called productive, practical, and theoretical. Aristotle used science in a much broader way than any we do meaning any ordered body of knowledge through causes and reasons. The purpose of the productive sciences, which we today call technology, is to produce things to make, improve, or repair material things in the world, and thus to improve our world. Farming, surgery, shipbuilding, carpentry, writing, and tailoring were examples in Aristotle's era as well as ours, while ours also includes many new ones like sci- cybernetics, aviation, and electrical engineering. The purpose of the practical sciences, which meant learning how to do or practice anything, how to act, is to improve your own behavior in some area of your life, of your own life. The two most important of these areas, Aristotle said, were ethics and politics. Aristotle saw politics not as a pragmatic bureaucratic business of running a state's economy, but as social ethics, the science of the good life for a community. Other examples of practical sciences includes economics, athletics, rhetoric, and military science. The third kind of sciences is the theoretical or speculative, contemplative, those that seek the truth for its own sake, that seek to know just for that sake of knowing, rather than for the sake of action or production. Though Though of course they will have important practical application. These sciences include theology, philosophy, physics, astronomy, biology, psychology, and math. Theoretical sciences are more important than practical sciences for the very same reason. Practical sciences are more important than productive sciences because their end and goal is more intimate to us. Productive sciences prefer some external thing in the material world that we use. Practical sciences prefer our own action, our own lives, and theoretical sciences prefer our very selves, our souls, our minds. They make us nobler persons, and that is the reason for pursuing philosophy in general and philosophy of religion in particular. Not to make money or things or even to live better, but to be better, to be more, to grow your mind as you grow your body. Myth, religion, and philosophy. In this section, we see the healthy relationship between myths, religion, and philosophy. We need to recognize that myth is not always opposed to reason. We know to appreciate the fact that religion and philosophy emerged from myths. Early in the 20th century, many scholars, intellectuals, and philosophers looked on the relationship of religion, philosophy, and science as an evolutionary one, in which the more sophisticated ways of looking at the world simply replaced the older ways. Religion itself was often thought to arise from magic, and so schemes illustrating the development of human thought might look like this. According to this scheme, everything originated from magic. Only science, mathematics, and logic would deserve to continue. Others, including theology and myth needs to fade away, since these scholars thought of magic as a set of naive beliefs about how to manipulate nature. They thought that science ultimately fulfilled this promise by actually manipulating nature in the ways that magic has promised. Especially associated with this evolutionary scheme was James George Fraser, whose classic The Golden Bough argued for such an evolutionary view of science. Such an understanding dismissed any other possible contents of religion or philosophy as something of a mistake or misdirection. Some philosophers have simply decided that philosophy also should simply end. They hold that philosophy has to give way to science finally, while plenty of intellectuals retain a broad hostility towards religion. And this kind of evolutionary scheme is now generally disc- discredited in actual philosophy or the history of religion studies. Today we have become wiser, and we know that ancient religions did not grow out of magic, and science does not address many or most of the concerns that have actually been central in traditional religion and philosophy. It is possible to go to the opposite extreme and reject any evolutionary sense of the development of human thought, saying that all forms of thought in all places and art and at all times are simply different, but this does not address the dynamic of real changes that take place in the same places and to the same traditions. It is not much of a leap to say that those traditions in their later forms involve levels of sophistication above what occurred earlier. If we can see philosophy growing out of myths, out of mythic thought in Greek history, the difficulty arises about just how we are to then distinguish philosophy from religion, as the two later coexist but are distinguished from each other. Socrates talks about the gods all the time, and it is not clear why he should not be regarded as a religious figure rather than a secular philosopher. As it happens, the relatively easy distinction between religion and philosophy in Western history occurs because of the historical accident that the religion of people like Socrates and Plato later ceased to exist. The old gods of the Greeks, Egyptian, Babylonian, Phoenicians, Romans, Celts, Germans, Slavs, etc., were later entirely replaced by one old religion, Judaism, and two new ones from the same tradition, Christianity and Islam. It is now possible to say religion and mean one of those, and to say philosophy and simply mean that Greek stuff, where the religious side of Greek thought just need not be taken seriously. The historical circumstances that allow for that simple pattern of distinction does not occur in India or China. A book like the Bhagavad Gita is a profoundly important religious document for Hinduism, yet it is also one of the fundamental documents of Indian philosophy. Indeed, the Gita appears to have been first produced by Indian philosophy, the Sankhya and Yoga schools, then it been transformed into a religious document and finally used for both religious and philosophical purposes later on. This kind of intermingling makes distinctions between religion and philosophy very difficult in the Indian tradition. In fact, most of the Indian scholars does not even approve of such a distinction. Some difficulties exist for Chinese thought but also for medieval Western thought, where philosophers are easily classified as Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. If philosophy had nothing to do with religion, then presumably it would be superfluous to identify Moses, Maimonides as Jewish or Avicenna as Muslim. It is not, and this was a question that many such philosophers had to face at the time. The way that one of the greatest Christian philosophers, Saint Thomas Aquinas, dealt with it was to identify different sources of authority. He distinguished natural theology, which is based on reason alone, from dogmatic theology, which is based on revelation. Jewish and Muslim philosophers had made similar distinctions, and some of them had even thought, which Saint Thomas didn't, that reason could ultimately justify everything in religion. Definitions for religion and philosophy must involve similar distinctions, where the original context of all thought is mystic. Since myths does not argue, but philosophy does, a rule of thumb for religion is that it mixes in philosophic elements but always retains an authoritative link to a mythic context. The most important thing was thing about the mythic context, however, is not always that it exerts a dogmatic authority, but that it is historical. As a American philosopher points out, philosophy cannot conjure up historical particulars out of pure reason, but religion always relates its truth to historical particulars, the actual source of the religion or its received tradition. Further, Furthermore, contrary to the earlier evolutionary schemes about human thought, it must be accepted that mythic thought and so religion cannot be replaced by philosophy or by science. Thus, a revised and evolutionary pattern acceptable to most contemporary scholars thus could look like this. According to this revised scheme, the only ongoing traditions whose worth we might fundamentally question would be those of magic, astrology, and other occult arts, although there is no doubt that serious forms of some of these continue to exist. None of the traditions really continue independently after their origin. Religion, philosophy, and even science exerts influences on each other. Only theology and philosophy are shown connected below their origins because it is hard to know what to call someone like Saint Thomas Aquinas, primarily a philosopher or primarily a theologian. Here, philosophy and religion are distinct and related. What philosophy contains that science cannot are real questions about being and value. Science must assume the reality of its objects, so it cannot have a critical metaphysical attitude, nor can it make any judgments at all about value, since some principles of value must be assumed in order to judge in some predictive or experimental way the value consequences of a scientific theory. What religion contains that philosophy cannot is the actual value embodied in large interpretative structures concerning life, the world, etc. Philosophy is only descriptive and has difficulty justifying any first principles that it might identify. Thus, the relationship between philosophy of religion, theology, and myth is much more intimate than most of us think. In the next section we see the explicit relationship between theology and philosophy of religion. Theology and philosophy of religion. The above discussion leads us to the relationship between theology and philosophy of religion. As such, both of them deal with the same topics. The crucial differences is that theology presupposes faith, while philosophy of religion does not. As such, philosophers of religion are required to bracket off their faith in their philosophical discussion. Since the field of research of both the topics are related, many themes and insights are also shared between the two disciplines. Philosophy of religion and social sciences. Starting from 19th century, there have been quite much of debate among sociologists Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, and psychologist Sigmund Freud, Carl Gustav Jung, whose ideas has profoundly influenced philosophy of religion. As such, philosophy of religion have borrowed many findings from sociology, psychology, and even from cultural anthropology. Recently, sociobiology uh, has also dialogued with philosophy of religion on issues like the origin and evolution of altruism and evolutionary equilibrium. Further, we give two contemporary disciplines which contribute our thinking about God. The first one studies our brain, neurosciences or neurotheology, and the second one, the universe, astronomy, or Big Bang theories. Both these sciences find traces of God, which may be used by philosophers of religion to understand God and human beings better. Neurotheology. Neurotheology, also known as spiritual neuroscience, is the study of correlations of natural phenomena which with subjective experiences of spirituality and hypotheses to explain these phenomena. Neurotheology has been defined as science attempt at explaining religion within the physical aspect of the brain using rational thought. Proponents of neurotheology like Jacob Abraham and Augustine Pam- Pamplani of India hold that there is a neurological and evolutionary basis for subjective experiences traditionally categorized as spiritual or religious. The subject has formed the basis of several popular science books. Indian born Villayanur S. Ramchandran explored the neural basis of the hyper religiosity seen in temporal lobe epilepsy (TLE) using the galvanic skin response, which correlate with emotional arousal to determine whether the hyper religiosity seen in TLE was due to an overall high heightened emotional state or was specific to religious stimuli. By presenting subjects with neutral, sexually arousing and religious words while measuring GSR, Ramchandran was able to show that patients patients with TLE showed enhanced emotional response to the religious words, dismissed responses to the sexually charged words, and normal response to the neutral words. These results suggest that the medial temporal lobe is specifically involved in generating some of the emotional reactions associated with religious words, images, and symbols. Andrew B. Newberg and others describe neurological processes which are driven by the repetitive rhythmic situation which is typical of human ritual and which contribute to the delivery of transcendental feelings of connection to a universal unity. They posit, however, the physical stimulation alone is not sufficient to generate transcendental unitive experiences. For this to occur, they say there must be a blending of the rhythmic stimulation with ideas. Once this occurs, ritual turns a meaningful idea into a visceral experience. Moreover, they say that humans are compelled to act out myths by the biological operations of the brain on account of what they call the inbuilt tendency of the brain to turn thoughts into actions. Based on current neuroscientific research, Eugen Duberman, one of today's most prominent and controversial theologians in Europe, developed in two monumental volumes, Modern Neurology and the Question of God, published in 2006 and 2007, a radical critique of traditional conceptions of God and the soul and a sweeping reinterpretation of religion in light of neurology. The and the the anthropic principle. It has recently been realized that if some of the fundamental physical constants of the universe were only slightly different, different, then the existence of life in this universe would have been impossible. See Martin Rees just six numbers. There are many of these fort, fortuitous coincidences which have led some to believe that the universe has been fine tuned. Many explanations for this have been proposed. Is there some necessity for life to exist? Sentient intelligent life which could observe and ponder the universe, or else the universe could not come into being. Can the conditions for life be set less rigidity? Is there a multiplicity of universe with the constant set differently in each universe? But perhaps the most infamous interpretation of the anthropopic principle is that we living in a designer universe. In other words, can anthropic principle point to a God who has created this universe especially for human beings. Critic of the anthropic principle dismiss such thinking by saying that human life exists in its current form purely as a result of a nature of this particular universe. If the constants were set differently, then life might not exist, and we would not be around to ponder these questions. As Steven Weinberg says, to conclude that the constants of nature have been fine-tuned by a benevolent designer would be like saying, isn't it wonderful that God put us here on earth where there is water and air and the surface gravity and temperature are so comfortable, rather than some horrid place like Mercury or Pluto, where else in the solar system other than the earth could we have evolved. Other critics would also say that carbon based life is not the only possible type of life. Maybe the entirely different form of silicon based life would exist. For example, if the physical constraints were set differently, however, from the list of coincidence, it would appear that the majority of values which the constant could take would result in no life ever being possible. The universe either spreading too far too quickly or else collapsing back on itself. According to the proposer of string theory, Leonard Susskind, the notorious cosmological constant is not quite zero as it was thought to be. This is a cataclysm, and the only way that we know how to make any sense of it is through the revealed and despised anthropic principle. Recent discussion of the anthropic principle has moved away from the designer universe type of interpretation towards a so-called multiverse interpretation. This rehabilitation has been an anthropic principle come in form and could from being perceived as a slightly cranky theory on the periphery of science towards playing a central role in the latest interpretations of string theory and cosmology. The multiverse interpretation suggests that there are a vast number of different universes. The collection of universes being commonly referred to as the multiverse. The physical constants are set to different random values in each universe. The arrangement would require no fine tuning. We just happen to be inhabitant of a universe in which the physical constants are suitable for life. Further, according to string theory in physics, elementary particles are not particles but small vibrating strings. For the equations of string theory to be mathematically consistent, a string has to vibrate in 10 dimensions, which implies that six extra dimensions exist but are curled curled up too small to be detected. The the laws of physics in this universe would depend on the geometry of those hidden dimensions, but the solution to the equations is not unique as so many different geometrics are possible in these extra dimensions. The bundle of curled curled up extra dimensions can have many different shapes such as a sphere a, a donut, and so on. The vast collection of solutions differ in that each configuration has a potential energy associated with it called the vacuum energy, the energy of the space-time, when the four large dimensions are completely devoid of matter and fields. Each solution to the equinox could be taken as representing a universe with different physical constants and laws of physics. We would represent each of the 100 power 500 possible solutions as an abstract mathematical graph, plotting the plotting the vacuum energy against the geometrical parameters. The geometry of the small dimensions would try to adjust to minimize the vacuum energy, just as ball placed on a slope will roll downhill to a lower position. As the physical constants and laws of physics in our universe do not appear to be changing with time, we must be sitting at a minimum in the bottom of a valley. In particular, we seem to sitting at a minimum with a slightly positive vacuum energy. In such a scenario, can we speak of anthropic principle pointing to a designer God who has helped the evolution of our particular universe so that human beings could inhabit this planet? This is only a question posed without a definitive answer. Let us sum up. In this unit, we first saw the right from the beginning of Western culture philosophy is related to sciences. Then we saw how religion, philosophy, and even sciences stem from the myths. Then we saw in an elementary manner some modern sciences are related to philosophy of religion. Anthropic principle, the cosmological principle that theories of the universe are constrained by the necessity to allow human existence. This implies that the universe evolved was directed by an intelligence agency in such a way that the universe would give rise to human beings. New Neurotheology. It is the application of the neurological studies to theory and God concerns. For instances, it searches for the places in the brain where religious beliefs originate and studies the brain connections for spirituality. It tries to see if God can be understood better or explained away using the latest neurological research. Thank you.